Arsenal family, what is going on? Welcome back to another Monday night Arsenal experience. My name is DeMarcus and I want to welcome you to church this evening. Hey, before we get started, go ahead and share this video, get it out to those who aren't watching just yet. I promise you we got some good things in store for anybody watching. So hey, again, share this video, get it out there, hop in the chat, let us know who's watching, where you're watching from, who you're watching with, and let's get the night going. Arsenal Ben, take us away.
As I reflect, I find perspective. They're in the best and worst days of this life. You are always on my side. You're in the pain, you're in the promise, and on the days the furnace finds my faith, you're the fourth within the flames. I don't need to know what the future says, 'cause if the past could talk, it would tell me this: my God isn't finished yet. If he did it before, he can do it again. So I'll trust him in what comes next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. Yeah, my hindsight says I can trust him with what's next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. There's more ahead than what's behind me, 'cause through the highs and lows and in between, how'd you go ahead of me? And where you call me, I will follow. And if the water falls beneath my feet, then you'll pull me from the deep. I don't need to know what the future says, 'cause if the past could talk, it would tell me this: my God isn't finished yet. If he did it before, he can do it again. So I'll trust him in what comes next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. Yeah, my hindsight says I can trust him with what's next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. Ooh, whoa, whoa. I don't need to know what the future says, 'cause if the past could talk, it would tell me this: my God isn't finished yet. If he did it before, he can do it again. So I'll trust him in what comes next. 'Cause my hindsight says I can count on it. My God isn't finished yet. If he did it before, he can do it again. So I'll trust him in what comes next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness. Yeah, my hindsight says I can trust him with what's next. For the God I know is known for faithfulness.
Our souls awake to you and lift a song. have done, and still we know the best is yet to come. There's more to come. Open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Your presence here is all we need. You break our chains with sounds of victory. You're changing everything. So open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Come flood this space. No one else can take your place. Come have your way. No one else can take your place. Come flood this space. No one else could take your place. Come have your way. No one else could take your place. So open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Open the gates and let your glory come down. Open our hearts and let our worship pour out. Let it pour out. Here in my heart, you have found your place, replacing fear with your freedom. You lift me up, you lift me up. When all seems lost in my brokenness, I call your name and you answer. Held by your love, held by your love. In the night, through the struggle, through the trial, you have made my burden light. You have brought me back to life again. Whoa, 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 your love, it wipes every tear away. You calm the storms that surround me. You carry me, you carry me. Your light breaks through in my darkest hour. Your love is strong in my weakness. You are enough, you are enough. so I will follow. All I am yours now and forever. You won't let go, so I will follow with all I am. In the night, through the struggle, through the trial, you have made my burden light. You have brought me back to life again. Whoa, 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 You wanna let go, so I will follow. All I am yours now and forever. You wanna let go, so I will follow with all I am. You wanna let go, so I will follow. All I am yours now and forever. You wanna let go, so I will follow with all I am. In the night, through the struggle, through the trial, you have made my burden light. You have brought me back to life again. Whoa, 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 whoa,
Arsenal family, thank you so much for singing with us this evening. I got a couple of quick things for you before we get going any further. First off, hey, if you haven't already, definitely head over to our social media platforms and get yourself some merch. It's selling out super fast, and I promise you don't want to miss out on just like the quality and just how fresh and dope this is. I have this black one. I'm definitely about to go get the white one really soon because, again, they are selling out fast. So head over to our Instagram, Facebook, and grab yourself some merch. Next off, hey, if you enjoyed just kind of the content and the things that are going on around here in the Arsenal and you want to partner with us in that, we have 4 different ways to do that here on the screen. And really the main thing that we just want to kind of push and put out towards you and just make you aware of is that we want there to be no type of shame or guilt around giving. We know how that can get sometimes. So really just go with what the Lord has put on your heart and things like that. And if you do that, you literally can't do any wrong. So yeah. And if you haven't already, also be sure to text this number here on the screen. Whenever you do so, a message gets sent directly to Pastor Chad and Rob. And this is just another cool way to kind of stay connected within the community. I know they like send out just daily, or not daily, but maybe weekly, every other week, just like kind of encouragement, encouraging words, things like that, videos, worship videos, and just kind of keep you up to date again with what is going on within the Arsenal community. So again, definitely go ahead and text that number. You don't want to miss out on, cool updates and things like that. And with that being said, I want to introduce you to Pastor Chad as he continues to lead us in our One Another series.
Hey, what's up, Arsenal family? Thank you so much for sticking around for this part of the online experience. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Chad. I get the privilege of being one of the pastors here at the Arsenal, and we just want to thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for being here. We're stoked that we get to do this online experience with you on a Monday night. So, hey, I'm going to continue our series of talks that we've called Love One Another tonight, and I'm actually going to talk about restoring one another. I'm going to kick us off with our main verses for the day, and then I'll ask you some questions. We'll have some fun. Here we go. So we're going to be in Galatians 6, verse 1. I'm reading from the Passion Translation, and it goes like this. My beloved friends, if you see a believer who is overtaken with a fault, may the one who overflows with the Spirit seek to restore him. Win him over with gentle words, which will open his heart to you and will keep you from exalting yourself over him. Verse 2 says, love empowers us to fulfill the law of the Anointed One as we carry each other's troubles. So restoring people, we're talking about restoration, bringing people back to the new, right? To bring them back to a place where they are the best that they can be, the best of who they are, the best they're created to be. But as we step in this, I got a question for you. What is something that you have, like, that you're afraid of? Something you have a fear of in your life? Like, for me, I'm afraid of spiders. Like, I know they're much smaller than me and I could step on them if I need to, but I'm just afraid. I don't like spiders. I'm not a fan of them. When I was like 7 years old, I got bit by a spider on the leg. It was a bad deal. It was a brown recluse. Like, my leg got huge. It was disgusting. I don't like spiders. In fact, I don't like most creepy crawly things. Like, I don't, snakes are, I'm not a fan of snakes. They're cool from a distance, but also the devil was a snake. So, like, I don't know if that's that's kind of mean. I shouldn't say that, but I just don't like, I'm not a big fan of snakes. But what are you afraid of? Put it in the chats. Like, what's something that you're afraid of, that you have a fear of? I looked this up this week knowing that I was going to talk about this, and I found the top 10 fears that people have all over the world. And all over the world, they're pretty similar. So here they are. One is flying, public speaking, a fear of heights, a fear of the dark. This is adults, not just kids. This is adults, like afraid of the dark. Intimacy, death. Death's number 6. Like, that kind of stands out to me. Like, on this list, death is number 6. There's 5 things that people are more afraid of than dying. That's how afraid they are of things like flying and public speaking. They would just rather die, right? So death. Number 7 is failure. Number 8 is rejection. 9 is spiders, snakes, rats, just all the creepy crawly things. Like, there's a lot of people that are afraid of those. And then the last one's commitment. Maybe you know somebody who's got a fear of commitment, but these are the top 10 fears that people have. And as you look at fear, it's interesting. Fear and the human mind are an interesting thing, how they work together. In fact, fear can inhibit people. It can stop us from doing something. It can stop us in our tracks. But fear can also motivate people. It can be used either way. It can stop us or it can motivate us to move forward. One of like the biggest fears that's listed on this list is failure. And for me personally, this has always been one of my biggest fears, the fear of failure, of stepping into something, doing something, and failing at it. And rather than like simply stopping someone from taking steps or doing something, a lot of times the fear of failure can actually motivate greater striving for success, doing more, trying to be successful. Like there's this push to be successful, and really it's being driven by a fear of failure. Like, I would rather fail than I would rather succeed, if that makes sense. Like, or I would rather not fail than I would rather succeed. I don't want to fail, so I'm going to do this more and more to try to succeed. And the bad thing about that motivation is a lot of times when I'm afraid of failure, if I do succeed, it's not exciting because I just didn't want to fail. It's not that I wanted to succeed. I just can't fail. So you can't even really like celebrate that because it's almost a relief more than it is a celebration. And I think for a lot of people, fear can be a motivator. And I think, in fact, every decision that we make is based out of one of two places in our minds. Like, this all plays out in our mind. Why we do something, why we're gonna do it, or what we should do, all plays out in our minds, and it's all based off of two places in our minds. Either we make a decision like calmly, rationally, and with peace because we're making it from a place where we are securely loved and we know we're accepted and loved, and so we're making this decision from love. Or you make a decision out of fear. And it can't be both at the same time. No matter how hard you try, you can't make a decision out of fear and love. You're making it out of one or the other. Our mind, the thing that is pushing us forward, the motivator quite frequently is either love or fear. In fact, these two things, fear and love, believe it or not, are opposites. Love, the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is fear. In fact, in Scripture, in 1 John 4:18, it talks about this, how love and fear, perfect love and fear don't coexist. They cannot coexist. It says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. What this means is it's not that you haven't become perfect, it's that you don't understand the perfection of love, the love that we've received. If we're still operating out of fear, then we just don't understand that how loved we truly are. Because in fear, we're trying to prove something. There is a failure option there. There's punishment on the end of it. So we're trying to prove something one way or the other. We don't understand that we are loved and accepted already, where we can operate from that. So how does all of this affect how we love one another? What does this have to do with restoring each other? Well, if we know that fear and love are both motivators for you and I, then we can also reason that they are motivators for all the others around us. That they are motivators for the people that we come in contact with on a daily basis. In fact, Paul knew this. Most, if not all, of Paul's writings consisted of contrasting fear-based living and love-based living. The law uses fear as a motivator. And Paul knew this. He would talk about this quite frequently. The fear of punishment, that if I'm not good enough, if I don't do enough, then I will be punished, is baked into law. The gospel, though, is love-based. It's this idea that where grace is given and we receive this love freely and we live in freedom. They are contradicting each other. You can't have both. In fact, Paul says where the gospel is, if we add in law, it's no longer grace because you've entered into law. It's just like with love and fear. They can't coexist. True love casts out fear. Paul understood this in his teachings. In fact, all of Jesus' teachings consisted of showing what love-based living looked like. What his love, how it drove out fear. The people that Jesus would sit down with, would come in contact with, would lay his hands on, right? Like the lepers were told that they should stay out of the city. They can't be around anyone. They are unholy. They are unclean. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to reach out my hand and I will heal you. He sat with people that others said were not good enough, that didn't meet the standards. And so because of that, we see that Jesus actually was called all kinds of things. He was called a drunkard and a friend of sinners and all of these things, that Jesus was acquainted with people that were considered to not be okay. And he was showing us what love-based living looks like, what love-based interactions with other people looked like. So understanding the difference in how religion uses fear as a motivator that keeps people in bondage, and how the gospel uses love as a motivator that sets people free, is our journey of faith. And I think if we can understand, or at least take this idea that the gospel, the love of the gospel, excuse me, it casts out fear, then we can see that love sets us free. And if we take these two ideas of fear and love, we can walk into this chapter in Galatians 6, and I think look at what it looks like to restore our brothers and sisters from a place understanding how there is a fear-based motivation and there's a love-based motivation, and how Paul says which one we should use in order to restore those in our community, or those that we come in contact with that are maybe at a place where they need to be brought back to an understanding of who they truly are. In Galatians 6:1, Paul says, my beloved friends, this is the verses that we read at the beginning. If you see a believer who is overtaken with a fault, May the one who overflows with the Spirit seek to restore him. Win him over with gentle words, which will open his heart to you and will keep you from exalting yourself over him. In verse 1, real quickly, I just want to look at the phrasing, if you see a believer who is overtaken by fault or with fault. First, the word translated believer here is actually anthropos, which in the Greek just means human being. I think sometimes when we look at these scriptures and these passages, we could see, oh, this is just for believers. This isn't how we interact with everyone, but only those that are with us, right? But I think when we have this idea of us versus them, and we're reading it from Paul's writings, like that's not how he talked. Like the gospel is not an us versus them thing. So I don't believe that's what he's saying here. Anthropos just means human being. When you see a human being that is overtaken with a fault, you should restore them. We should treat them in a way that is restorative. I think that's a word, yeah. So I just want to get that out of the way. Many times, like this teaching looks like it's someone who is caught up in like sin. We'll take this first verse and somebody will say, well, if we see a believer who is like stuck in sin, their behavior is sinful. They're in this place of just doing something that is a sin, and we need to restore them. We need to bring them back. We need to remind them that that's not okay. But what Paul is actually saying here, this word for overtaken with a fault, the overtaken is actually in the Greek, it is the word prolobano. And prolobano, it's better explained as anticipating. They are anticipating, or they are in anticipation of a fault. Or if you want to use the word overtaken, then their mind is overtaken. Their thoughts are overtaken with fault. They are thinking that they are going to fail. They are set up in a place where they are fearing failure. So what he's saying here is like he's saying, hey, brothers and sisters, if it seems that someone continues to anticipate their next failure, then from your position of faith, from your understanding of faith, restore such a person in a spirit of courtesy and grace. Step in and let's restore them. If you see someone who is caught and is being motivated by a fear of failing, it's on us to go love them well and bring them back to a place of restoration. We know that like in this fear-based thinking, it stems from an idea that a system of having to prove ourselves. It comes from a system of where anticipating failure is just a byproduct, right? It's a byproduct of carrying this weight of having to prove yourself, having to prove that I'm good enough. Because under the law, fear-based thinking happens because I can fail, because everything falls on me. It is now my job to prove that I am holy, or to prove that I am righteous, or to prove that I am good enough to God. So the fear of failure steps in. It can exist in someone, or it can only exist for someone in a system that is set up as a succeed or fail system. Paul is saying here that is an old way of thinking. That is a law formula. That is living by your own works. That is in a way that you either do good or you do bad, and it's all on your behavior. It's in this system of law, in this system of fear-based thinking, it's motivated by guilt and shame. It's motivated by when I do something wrong, I'm guilty, and the shame part comes in and says, no, you're just not good. Like you as a human, you as your person is not good. Guilt says what I did is wrong. Shame says I am wrong. And the system is built where it takes place where I either succeed or fail. And so I'm either guilty or I'm not guilty. I'm either good or I'm shameful. And it's interesting when I take this idea, and I was reading some stuff on psychology and how our minds work, because I think what Paul's saying is if somebody is anticipating, if they're thinking about failing, a lot of this is happening in our minds, right? And in this article that I read in Psychology Today, it just coexisted. It ran parallel with what I was seeing from Paul. It says this: everyone hates to fail, but for some people, failing presents such a significant psychological threat, their motivation to avoid failure exceeds their motivation to succeed. This is what I was talking about earlier with this fear of failure. It says this fear of failure causes them to unconsciously sabotage their chances of success in a variety of ways. And we've all seen this, right? Where someone is so afraid to fail, they subconsciously sabotage themselves, right? So he continues, he says this: failing can elicit feelings such as disappointment, anger, frustration, sadness, regret, and confusion that, while unpleasant, are usually not sufficient to trigger a full-blown fear of failure. Indeed, the term is somewhat of a misnomer because it's not failure per se that underlies the behavior of people who have it. Rather, a fear of failure is essentially a fear of shame. People who have a fear of failure are motivated to avoid failing, not because they cannot manage the basic emotions of disappointment, anger, and frustration that accompany such experiences, but because failing also makes them feel deep shame. The fear of failure is truly a fear of shame. You see, in the law, the motivators of the law, of religion, like I said, they're guilt and shame. Guilt says that I've done something wrong. Shame says there is something wrong with me. Under this system, I know there is a potential that I can be bad. A fear of shame is a fear of being found out, being found as a liar, to be found as not good enough, to not be accepted, to not be worthy of love. The fear of shame is that I will be found to not be worthy. And the only system that works in is a system of religion. And if you look at Galatians, this entire chapter, we're in chapter 6 as we're reading this, but if you look at this entire chapter, Paul is talking about the contrast between law and grace, fear-based living and love-based living, what it looks like to trust the love of God and live from that, as opposed to trying to earn the love of God. Go read Galatians. It's a very short book. Read Galatians 1 through 6, and you're going to see this contrast, especially when you put on this lens of grace and you understand what it looks like to see what Paul is saying here. He's not saying, hey, when someone messes up, then we need to remind them what good behavior looks like. No, Paul is saying when you see that someone close to you is overtaken with a fear of shame, the fear of messing up, it's the job of those around us that it says overflow with the Spirit to restore this person. What does overflow with the Spirit mean? It means that we trust the love of God, that we know what it looks like to be gentle and kind, to step into this and have a conversation with someone, not to guilt or shame them, but to love them. Paul is saying when someone does this, gently and kindly invite them back into the environment of love. Remind them of their value. Rob talked about that last week, what our value is, where our value is found. Remind them of that. Remind them whose they are. Remind them that in an environment of love, failure is not a motivator, only love is. Fear has no place in the environment of love. Love enters us into freedom. In fact, in the chapter before this in Galatians 5:1, it says that it was for freedom we've been set free. This is where we live now. You know, how I know that someone has slipped back into an old mindset of law, or when I say law, I mean like works-based living, a living where it's on me, that the better I do, the better I am with God. The worse I do, the worse I am with God. When it is based on that, I know when someone has slipped into that thinking because they begin using language that wraps around the idea of succeeding or failing in their Christian walk. They talk about how God is mad at me or how God might be mad at me. They talk about how well they're doing with God because of what they are doing. Realize that this isn't just someone who is saying, oh, woe is me, God's so mad at me, but it's also someone that is saying, look at me, look at what I'm doing, look how good I am for God. To restore someone who is overtaken in their mind, who is anticipating their failure, to restore them is not to condemn, not to shame, not to cast guilt on them, not to tell them how bad they are, but to restore is to remind each other of our position in Christ, to remind each other of whose we are, to remind each other of the unconditional love that God has for each of us. This is what restoration looks like. This is what Paul is trying to say to us. In doing this, Paul says that love empowers us to fulfill the law of the Anointed One, to love one another the way that Jesus loved us. We said that in the first talk that we did on this series too. Jesus said, hey, go love each other the way that I have loved you. That's how they will know that you are my true followers, my true disciples. And when you do this, when you step into a place where you're fulfilling the law that the Anointed One gave us of loving others the way he loved us, we can then carry each other's troubles, Paul says. And how do we do this? What do we do to carry each other's troubles? Well, when people have slipped back into a mindset of success or failure on their own terms, on their own works with God, then sometimes we do things that are not good for us or not good for people around us. We self-sabotage or we do things to succeed, but we hurt the people around us. We're trying to succeed in our Christian walk. So in order for me to feel better about how my standing is with God, quite frequently, I have to put other people down because the lower they are, the higher I feel. And when we see this with people, how do we carry others' burdens? That leaves collateral damage. So we stick by people as they work through their mess. That's what carrying each other's burdens looks like. It means stepping into this and maybe carrying each other's burdens is reminding someone over and over that they are loved by God and watching them act like they don't believe that, and having to continue to remind them that they're loved by God. Maybe carrying the burden of trying to convince them that they're loved is part of our walk with people. It's not always easy. It wasn't easy for Jesus. And I can tell you it hasn't been easy even in our ministry in doing this with the Arsenal. There's been times where we've walked with people that other people have called us out and been like, hey, you shouldn't do that way. You should let them go, or you should kick them out, or you should do this. We're like, no, that's not what we see. Like, the idea of the gospel is to walk with people in the mess and continue to remind them not that they're bad, but that they are loved. They are loved by God, that we are loved by God, unconditionally loved. In 1 John 4, one of the first verses I read today, it says this. This is the verse, the verses around the verse. It says that perfect love casts out fear. It says this: those who give thanks that Jesus is the Son of God live in God, and God lives in them. We've come into an intimate experience with God's love, and we trust in the love he has for us. So we've stepped into this place where we trust the love that God has for us. It says that God is love. Those who are living in love are living in God, and God lives through them. You see this encompassing factor of God lives in us and we live in God. It's this environment that we step into. By living in God, love has been brought to its full expression in us, it says, so that we may fearlessly face the day of judgment, because all that Jesus now is, so are we in this world. What he's saying is to face the day of judgment. If I'm based in a fear-based, do-it-myself system, then to face the day of judgment might be worrisome, because I either did good enough or I didn't do good enough. But in the system of love, where we've stepped into understanding that God loves us and we live from that place, John is saying that all that Jesus now is, so are we in this world. We've received the life of Christ. Therefore, on Judgment Day, I can fearlessly face it because the cross worked, because the life of Christ has been given to me, because I have nothing to worry about. Because there is not punishment or failure involved in a love system that is based on the law and fear-based system. That's not where we live. He continues and says, when we know this, love never brings fear, for fear is always related to punishment. But love's perfection drives the fear of punishment far from our hearts. Whoever walks constantly afraid of punishment has not reached love's perfection. Our love for others is our grateful response to the love God first demonstrated to us. Our love for others is easy to give when we understand how much God loves us. It's our grateful response. It's like, God loved me so much that I need to tell you that he loves you so much. I need to restore your thinking to remind you that you are loved. So I want to ask you, do you, in your life, especially in the relationship that you have with God or walking in this faith journey, are you motivated by fear or are you motivated by love? Are you trusting the love that God has for you and living in a place of freedom, or are you questioning your value and your worth at times in this walk with God? Do you let fear guide your emotions and have a fear of failure, especially when it comes to your relationship with God? Has someone told you that you're not worthy or good enough, or they set stipulations on God's love for you that you must do this in order to be loved? Have they told you you're not good enough, that you need to do more, you need to be more, you need to become something else? Or are you being told that you are loved unconditionally? Do you believe that? Have you stepped into a place where you trust the love that he has for you? Because when you do, you can step into a place where you can tell others how loved they truly are, and we can restore the mindset of those around us. We can bring them back into a mindset and the environment of love. We want to be that place where a community online or in person where we help restore your thinking, that we remind you that you have nothing to prove, that you are loved, that you are a child of God, that your value and your worth have been set by the Creator, and that you are loved by that Creator. The great theologian John Lennon once wrote, there are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we are afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we are open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first in all our glory and our imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. I take this statement that John Lennon made, and I look at it and it makes sense. When we need to learn to love ourselves, to experience the love that God has for us so that we can give it to others. In fact, John said that. Our love for others is our grateful response to the love that we've received from God. So Arsenal family, today I want to invite you into freedom. I want to invite you into an environment of love where you can experience freedom. There's no longer a hierarchy or a climbing up the ladder, but you are experiencing freedom because in an environment of love, we are surrounded by it and we are moving in it. I want to invite you into that environment so that you can experience the love God has for you, so that you can then remind others of the love that God has for them. So Arsenal, go be free. Go experience that freedom and invite others around you into freedom. Arsenal, I love you. Go love well, because it's truly who you are meant to be.
Arsenal family, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. I really hope that blessed you as much as it did me. A couple quick things before you go. If you haven't heard yet, we are hosting in-person church on Sundays. So if you feel comfortable with joining us, please do. Be on the lookout for our RSVP posts on our social media platforms. There you get to sign up for not only yourself, but your family, mom, dad, cousin, son, you name them. We want to see you guys there. And lastly, if you haven't already checked out any of our worship videos, be sure to do that. I promise you, they're amazing. And with that being said, have an amazing week, Arsenal fam. We love you. Can't wait to see you next week.